Indiana has a really troubled past with race. Marion was a very segregated city, and Marion, Indiana is the site of the last lynching in Indiana in 1936. And I think that north central swath of Indiana, Anderson, Kokomo, Muncie, Marion, Elwood, Indiana used to be like the Klan capital of Indiana. So, I mean, the Klan was very powerful in the state. Obviously, everyone at VU knows that they were playing a role as bidders on the property back in the mid-20s. And even at Notre Dame, Knute Rockne, one of his players was beaten up there was a Klan convention going on in South Bend around the same time as that, if I remember correctly. And the rest of the team went to avenge his beating, and Rockne headed them off, which was a good thing because probably some of them would have been killed. But I often ask students, why did they beat up that Notre Dame player? And they said, well, he was black. And I said, no, they didn't have any black players. He was Catholic. And they often forget that the Klan didn't have much use for people of color or Catholics. My memories of Valparaiso, and I know, since I'm a history teacher, and I know a lot about Valpo, and in 1959 there were 12,500 people in Valparaiso. It's 20,000 less than today. Valpo was lily white when I was a kid growing up. Porter County as a whole had been this kind of, island. LaPorte County had some minorities, not to the extent that Lake County did, but there just weren't minorities here. There were some Eastern European immigrants like my mother, but no people of color. People probably felt that they liked Valpo without, any African Americans, and I'm sure there was an element that wanted to keep it that way, but I'm sure those elements existed in places like Gary, where there were African Americans who had come up from the South during the Depression looking for work and stuff. It's just part of the of Valpo's past. It may not be a part that we should be especially proud of. Courageous people like Walt and Carl Lutze and others, though, who championed this movement of people, did bring about significant change. And I think there eventually, most people, I'm sure not everyone, accepted the fact that our community was changing, and it's hard to argue with the values of a diverse population. I do think, there's always a lot of work to be done in that area, and Walt Reinert started a long time ago, and it's not done, and it's not quite 50 years ago, 45 years ago or so, but it might be 100 years before we get it where we want it.